So, look, I get it. We've covered what feels like every single angle of legalized sports betting. The science of setting odds, the promo codes, where the money goes, problem gambling, all that sort of stuff and more. But tonight, we're going to go in depth on a question that's a bit harder to answer. What about the integrity of the sports themselves? I know that's abstract. Stay with me. It'll make sense. I'm talking about athletes and fans. Will people cheat? Will fans be rooting for their wallets instead of their alma mater? Let's start with the players. You see, just this week, the MLB launched an investigation into one of its biggest stars, Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani's interpreter is accused in an illegal gambling scheme. He claims that Ohtani helped him to pay off $4.5 million in gambling debts. Ohtani denies this, saying the interpreter stole from him.
依頼したことももちろん全く、ありません。
So I never bet on baseball or any other sports, or never have asked somebody to do it on my behalf. And I have never went through a bookmaker to bet on sports.
This, of course, is a massive story and still an open investigation. Frankly, we don't know what happened. But either way, it's a clear example of how gambling can interfere with the game. Perhaps the most famous gambling scandal in sports history is Pete Rose. He agreed to a lifetime ban from the sport of baseball in 1989 after the MLB found he was placing bets on the Cincinnati Reds while playing for and managing the team. Another infamous example, shoeless Joe Jackson and the 1919 Chicago Black Sox scandal. 8 players were accused of losing the World Series on purpose in exchange for $100,000. They were all acquitted in court, but the league still banned them from play. And it's not just baseball. 5 Boston College basketball players were convicted in a point-shaving scheme in 1978. That means they were missing buckets on purpose and rigging the score. In 1996, 13 Boston College football players were kicked off the team for placing bets. What's the deal in Boston? I'm not sure. In the early 2000s, there was the infamous Tim Donaghy scandal. That's the NBA ref who pleaded guilty to gambling charges. Not that Donaghy is the most trusted source in the world on this, but he does actually think legalized gambling will lead to more scandals like his, which is an interesting thing to hear. He told CNBC in 2018, I think it happens at a college level. They win by 10 when the line is 12 or 14. So in their mind, they're not hurting their team. They're just collecting money and not winning by as many as the line indicates they should. 6 years later, and here we are. A letter from the NCAA president last summer found 175 infractions of its sports betting policy since 2018. And no doubt one of them was this story out of Iowa. Last May, 41 athletes at Iowa and Iowa State were investigated for criminal conduct related to sports gambling. Many of them bet on the games that they played in. Some have since pled guilty. Others have had their charges dropped, and a handful are still fighting all of this in court. I asked a sports law professor at Duke about all of this, and he says while it may seem like more gambling will mean more problems, in reality, making it legal creates more safeguards.
There are actually fairly sophisticated, extensive monitoring systems that would certainly pick up gambling by players, for example. Once you make it legal, you can have some greater control in monitoring the market.
Some greater control, but these systems are not foolproof. For instance, in the case of those Iowa students, they used family members' names to try and keep from getting caught. At the professional level, at least 12 NFL players have been suspended for violating gambling rules in the last 5 years, and now the league has kind of tougher gambling policies. But it is important to note, in these more recent examples, gambling rules were broken, yes, but no one is accused of cheating or trying to fix games. That Duke professor told me that he doesn't actually think the scandals of the 70s and 80s and 90s will make a comeback.
Do I think it's extraordinarily likely? I actually don't. It's relatively hard to fix games outside of individual sports, and there are pretty strong incentives not to participate in such things. But when you have that much money and that many people involved, I think it's inevitable that there will be some.
And perception is a very powerful thing. Sometimes it can feel like reality. And it's not hard to see why some people could question what they see on the field, knowing how much money is on the line. You might remember this Los Angeles Rams game from this past season. Down 10 points with only seconds left. The game was out of reach, but instead of downing the ball like they usually do so no one gets hurt on a play that doesn't matter, the players came sprinting out onto the field to snag 3 points and a field goal. Why? Well, nobody could really tell. And while the play didn't make a difference in who won the game, the final score certainly mattered to the gamblers. For the people who bet on the point spread, that field goal that, again, didn't matter to the final score was the difference between a win and a loss if you gambled on the game. The Rams head coach had said that that had nothing to do with it, but the internet had a lot of other opinions on that. Here's the deal. Sports betting was an $11 billion industry in 2023. It's going to be even bigger in 2024. And everyone wants a slice. The state, the teams, the players, the former players, the leagues, the fans. This past weekend, a good friend of mine and a diehard NC State fan rooted for Carolina to win by 8 points against Michigan State because he had some money on the game. I don't think he ever imagined the day he'd be cheering for the Tar Heels. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? Just this week, the NCAA president urged lawmakers to ban prop betting on college athletes. That's where you can bet on how many points a player might score or who's going to hit the first bucket in the game. Is he overreacting? Or are we all leaping into sports betting before looking at where we might land? Let me know what you think. Email me. Tell me your thoughts. Dan@WRAL.com. Tell me what is on your mind, and we'll go in depth.